Edwin, you go ahead and start.
Excellent. Hi, guys. Sorry for the no video. Thank you for joining today. In terms of the webinar that we entitled here, Cloud Security Evolved and Your Path to Success for Symantec and Broadcom. My name is Edwin Davis. I'm Senior Architect and Solution Engineer here at Aurora, who as an organization has been a long-term partner for Symantec/Broadcom. And having been at Aurora for 5 years, I've had disciplines around a broad range of the Symantec security portfolio, which we'll be discussing today on SASE, as it comprises of a number of those solutions. At Aurora, our aim essentially is not only to be sort of a professional service partner of yours, but also to be a strategic key partner as well. And so hence, we're pretty excited to share this information with you guys today. And so before we get into, as we get into this, many of you may or may not have be familiar with the term SASE. And I think most of you are probably familiar with the terms like cloud adoption, digital transformation, and so forth. And I'm hoping that the goal here for today is to give you a clear understanding of what SASE is essentially. And then we'll jump into talking about Broadcom's approach to fulfilling this new Gartner category, in terms of the security tools and integrations that they have that fit into that. And then last, we'll talk about sort of the assessments that Aurora provides, to help you with your current security posture in terms of preparation to embrace this new security model, essentially. And so what I'm going to be looking at here in terms of my portion of it, the first section really will be to talk about what SASE is, how it emerged really, and sort of the benefits and sort of importance around that. And then lastly, I'll be talking about sort of the approach to a successful adoption of that. And so we have our Symantec folks, Craig Faulkner will be talking as well in terms of digging in deeper about the specific product details that SASE comprises of in terms of their portfolio. And then we'll talk briefly about the network assessment piece that we offer at Aurora that will help you prepare for this. Okay. So starting off with this, I have, and actually, Sam, I don't know if you can move the slide for me. I know we had little challenges here. If you can potentially do it, because for some reason it doesn't seem to be. Yeah, that'd be great. So when we look at the formal definition of SASE, it's a bit of a mouthful here in terms of what it consists of, right? By definition, it's described as capabilities are delivered as a service, based on identity of the entity, real-time context, enterprise security compliance policies, and continuous assessment of risk and trust throughout the session. Identities of entities can be associated with people, groups of people, devices, applications, services, IoT systems of the edge computing location, which is a bit of a mouthful when you read all of this, right? And so I kind of condensed this and kind of broke it down to other definitions that you may see, which is essentially basically the network side of the equation combined with the security point solutions. And again, we'll be talking about these in more detail, but when we look at the network side, we're looking at SD-WAN, WAN, CDN, and in terms of the security side of the house, in terms of it converging, would be things like zero trust network access, VPN, firewall as a service, CASB, and the like, and into a really unified global cloud native service. And I stress the point about being native and cloud-based, because that's really the essence of how this would work. Now, Gartner actually predicts that 40% of the enterprises will be embracing SASE roughly around 2024. And so this is, as you know, it's sort of a new category and adoption. And again, this is something that's rolling out, which is why we're excited to kind of introduce it to you guys if you haven't heard about it, so that you can kind of be up front in terms of being able to prepare for this adoption. The other thing you'll see here on the slide is I put in the zero trust at the very bottom in terms of the model, which I'm sure many of you are aware of. And really talking about SASE without zero trust wouldn't be doing it justice, because essentially it's sort of the basis by which it took breath, right? And so we're going to get into that in terms of them being a duo and a combination from which it spawned from. And so we'll get into some of that. So if you could proceed, Sam, into the next slide. Okay, and so as we look forward here into the evolution of this, right, I'm going to describe a few scenarios of kind of how this came to be, right? So looking at that very first bubble here in terms of the network perimeter, right? We were looking at the sort of the traditional enterprise perimeter, right? And this environment, as we all well know, right, was most of the traffic was going between locations of an enterprise, via MPLS, point to point, stuff were standard across, headquarters to branch offices. Most of the apps, of course, were located in the headquarters, right? The flow of data was really between this area and moving laterally, right? And so the setup of the network and security infrastructure on this reflected exactly that, right? The data between these offices would potentially move, and the data was centralized. And of course, yes, we had some, internet, traffic that was going out for browsing. But again, most of the data resides inside the network. And that was kind of primarily how things were stacked in terms of the security stack. Firewalls, proxies, and the like were all basically protecting this type of implementation and this model for how we knew it. And so the second scenario that we're looking here as we move further out is when the adoption of SaaS came, right? We slowly moved into that area where we would, the companies, the challenges became when the remote user base started to expand and companies were taking that first initial step into the SaaS solution arena and, pulling into the fold of things like Salesforce and other content management systems and so forth. But again, still with that traditional model. And that brought a lot of difficulties in terms for the organizations in terms of managing it, securing it, and all of these network systems, because essentially the data was going out and traveling through the central data centers to branches, offices, along with some connectivity to the network edge for various public clouds services, but they would be hauled back into the corporate network, which obviously would be an issue for throughput and bandwidth concerns coming through that and having access, through the corporate network still with some, like I said, public cloud present services available there. And so this traffic that we're talking about sort of changed the landscape quite a bit because all the volume that we were talking about now is now coming, from various different areas, right? The destinations had changed. Basically, a lot of the data that we're dealing with now is electronic, and where the data lived also changed quite a bit as they started moving out. And so we saw things like infrastructure as a service obviously come, where we were hosting our infrastructure through AWS, Azure. Video conferencing became very big, and the sharing and collaborations was obviously a big concern. So obviously there was a bit of a hit in terms of performance with this traditional model and this early adoption for SaaS. And so we really moved in terms of the external and internal traffic flows kind of inversely, right? First approach was, hey, we're totally internal, good portion of the 3/4 of the traffic, let's say, were internally driven, to now where we've kind of flipped that and it's going external, right? We're really moving into the modern approach of today. And so where we have direct access, we've really evolved to a direct access, which I'm sure all of us on the phone have now known. We've moved from on-prem Exchange over to 365. Perfect example, right? And the list goes on. Salesforce, Box, AWS, Dropbox, DocuSign, Slacker, and it continues on. So most of our traffic now needs to go direct, right? And so that's where we ran into a concern of being able to basically handle the security around that. And so the real question came to how do we handle this, and what we would need a robust security set of tools to really manage this environment in terms of how we would go about protecting this. And so that's kind of where the cloud edge term kind of came from, because our perimeter, or the edge as we know it in terms of the traditional sense, would be at our firewalls, at the core switches and proxies at the edge of our environment. Now the edge has then expanded, right? Essentially, the edges are your mobile devices, your devices, and access and users throughout. And so that's basically how that edge term really came to be. And so taking a look at this direct approach, with being able to handle different users and groups and individuals in terms of their access, was really the initiative here in order to provide the security that was required. And hence comes the term secure access service edge, right? And so basically that's the evolution in a nutshell in terms of the perimeter kind of moving out. And so that protection that we're providing is really a combination of security tools and sets that will help to embrace this adoption that we've had, this digital transformation of moving to the cloud, where all of our business perimeter applications are now sitting out there and providing security around all of that. If you could move to the next slide, Sam, thank you. And so it's no surprise to anybody that obviously COVID has accelerated this, right? We know that the workforce has now moved specifically, remote, and the pandemic has instantly shifted organizations' priorities, right? It's basically turned them on their head, really, in terms of creating this, dramatic, and kind of rapid, scalable support model for being able to handle this remote workforce. And so this accelerated growth has obviously pushed this SASE category into the forefront, which a lot of you guys have probably been seeing. And so, we got to keep in mind that this change potentially may not be going anywhere anytime soon, at least away in terms of us getting back to the standard models. And we've actually personally at Aurora, I've had our clients and, HR and CFO leaders, planning for the remote service to be, part of their lives for the near future. And so we're, really planning around that. We've had, a number of our clients actually reach out to us to help them with this infrastructure and help to implement solutions that will be part of sort of the SASE platform, which Craig will talk about in terms of the specific apps. But yes, we've had individuals really reach out to us to really have us implement a lot of the tools that would be comprised of this entire platform architecture. You can go to the next slide, Sam. And so when we look at the duo here, really, when we look about the zero trust, which you remember from the previous slide on the definition, I had the zero trust there kind of embedded in the bottom there, as it was sort of the foundation of what SASE is, right? We went from, basically looking at, never trust and always verify, really now into this future network security architecture, if you will. We had a framework, and now we have this kind of platform play, if you will, and a architecture by which this sits in. And so the zero trust model really, which was created back in 2010, which many of you know, by a gentleman by the name of John Kindervag, who was at the time was sort of the president and principal analyst of Forrester, right? And came up with this model. And the concept really was just all about, requiring, the security around users for those in the organization and enterprise networks, and able to authorize and authenticate these on a continuous basis in terms of configuring a secure posture around that, and being able to grant access, at the application level, really at that layer 7 level. And so by doing so, we really kind of got rid of that assumption that once you were authenticated, there was an implicit trust really granted, right? Let's look at that, for a minute. When we looked at situations like, Edward Snowden is a perfect example of this, right? In the case of Snowden, right, he demonstrated the lack of the zero trust, right? Because basically he had access that granted him approval to be able to get into environments that he didn't, over and above what were required. So we weren't practicing least privilege in this particular case at the NSA, where if we did have the zero trust framework in place, it's very possible that we could have, been alerted to this. There would have been some indicators, obviously, of things that were going on that weren't right in terms of the access he was granted, and potentially have stopped it entirely. So the idea of that zero trust model does really sit firmly inside of what the SASE has to offer. So basically, looking at that, he exploited a broken trust model, which we're all aware of now that, we do need to ensure that we protect adequately. And so we will be talking about some of the services that are part of that. So as we proceed here, you can just go to, here, in terms of the difference between these two, in terms of how they came, as I mentioned to you, the zero trust model was really formed in Forrester. And these are the things that, just comparing one to one here against each other, that the Gartner came out with it in late last year of the SASE solution framework, essentially, or architecture, I should say, and that it really went from, multiple products essentially at its inception to now having sort of a collective, single pane of glass environment where there's a platform for this, where you can get all of these products and available to you at one particular spot. And so you can see the difference between sort of the framework and how the multiple vendor architecture having sort of best of breed, if you will, in terms of the scope of the vendors versus, what we're looking at in terms of it being managed by a single vendor in this particular scenario here. And that they were really policy driven around the traffic redirection on the SASE side, whereas it was more of an end operation from, zero trust model, if you will, on the zero trust when it was first created. And so that's sort of the scope of the responsibilities and the breakdown there that they're displaying here in this particular slide. So we can proceed here. And then here, I just wanted to take a moment to kind of discuss sort of the benefits, right? Like, what is this SASE thing about? What are the benefits of what it offers to us here? And so, at Aurora here, being your strategic partner, we go beyond just kind of doing professional services for you and want to take full advantage of what the SASE architecture, can do in terms of helping you identify sort of multiple users and devices as they interact with the network, and then apply policies based on security and access protocols, related to applications and data and how you're using them, essentially, right? So unlike sort of that traditional model that I was describing to you in the first few slides, where the centralized information was kind of controlled around that single policy, Aurora will really be able to help you enable your organization to provide security access regardless of where the users are, the applications or devices are located, essentially embracing that full SASE architecture comprehensively. And so when we look at things, we're looking at things like cost, for example, right? Securing the various aspects of a distributed network architecture that incorporates sort of multiple points can be pretty costly, right? And in terms of undertaking, right? And so every security solution, you'd have to monitor it, you'd have to update it and maintain it. And that, of course, requires resources. And so rather than that approach, essentially, we'd be looking at really deploying the SASE solution as a single platform, right? And that would provide a more comprehensive approach to the security and significantly, obviously, reduce the IT expenses and kind of freeing up your resources needed in order to maintain the environment. And also, in addition, like, we're looking at improved performance, right? So the cloud native aspect of SASE itself is both scalable and sort of streamlined, right? It allows users to access applications and data from any endpoint without having to jump through various hoops, VPN and what we're used to from the traditional model. And so it really turns that work and collaboration into a faster approach, really, for being able to do that and working collectively with various teams. And one of the inherent advantages of cloud-based infrastructure is really its flexibility, right? We have new features and controls, potentially protocols that can be added at a whim, right? Because it's cloud and it's being managed in the cloud. And again, we don't have to maintain, roll out patches and those things in order to get that, which requires time and resources in order to accomplish those. We also look at sort of the reduction in complexity, right? So managing multiple and security products obviously is a challenge, and we all know that we've been there. And so the consolidation really of the IT network and security stack essentially into this cloud service model is going to help with that. We have, it basically is valuable IT resources essentially you can manage and update and maintain security access controls, from, again, that single point I was mentioning to you, rather than having these multiple systems and multiple consoles to have to access. This really does help to shift the focus and better utilize everyone's time in terms of being able to maintain the environment. The threat prevention side of it is good as well, because it basically helps to give you greater visibility in terms of risk mitigation, right? All users, applications, and devices essentially can be monitored and managed, regardless of the location. And so it becomes more important that the separate controls be placed around each one of these. And so having that capability obviously allows us to be able to reduce the risk and mitigate those and remediate those quicker based on the ability to have the controls around each one of those. And that kind of takes us back to sort of that zero trust security model where you have that micro perimeter, which many of you are probably familiar with having that around the data and the asset. The data protection as well is one of the things that, we all know and is near and dear to our hearts. We know that, data loss of any kind of sensitive information can have tremendous consequences on our organization. And so consolidating that architecture that applies sort of that policy-based security around every level of the network and architecture really does help to protect that data, depending on, regardless of where it's located. So having that overarching data protection also coupled into the equation here definitely helps. And last but not least, the zero trust. Again, this framework assumes basically any user, any device, or any application, connecting to a network is a potential threat. There's no question about that. And we've seen that with the increase in breaches and various things that we see on a daily basis. And so we want to make sure that that is definitely at the foundation of what SASE has to offer, is really making sure that we do the zero trust approach by removing that trust assumption, right? Whether the user is offered on the corporate network, the cloud-based nature of SASE itself, like I said, allows organizations to provide that complete session protection no matter where you are. We can move to the next slide, Sam. And so, after talking a little bit about what SASE is, where it came to be, or how it came to be, I should say, and sort of some of the benefits of it, how do we position you now? How do we strategically position you, at Aurora now to get you into a good place where you can feel comfortable that you're making, the correct adjustments and tweaks to your current infrastructure and tools in order to adopt this, right? So really, it really comes down to, defining your zero trust strategy, right? And Aurora, we've always focused on sort of the business outcome for our clients, right? The main question to ask really is your end goal, right? What business outcomes are you looking to achieve, right? The better you can align sort of your business goals with the technology, it definitely benefits in terms of the immediate ROI that you would receive. And so really determining that first step in terms of what your business outcomes are really do help us in terms of defining what it is we want to protect and how we're going to go about protecting that. And so determining who needs access and what needs to have access in terms of the devices definitely helps in that initial stage of that zero trust sort of methodology. We also want to make sure that we prioritize the capability of your current environment, right? We're working pretty much designing from the inside out and evaluating what your current capabilities are. And so at Aurora, we always conduct sort of an assessment to ensure that we're able to see what your posture is currently and how we can make improvements if there are any gaps, where the pluses and minuses are, and really take a look at that overall picture and provide the best consultative engagement for you guys in terms of making sure everything is secure in terms of your approach and your business objectives. And so also in line with that is prioritizing, sort of the identifying the technologies, I should say, sorry, in terms of the focus of where your current solutions and the results that you're getting from them, right? We want to provide and see exactly what, in terms of being scalable and understanding what your technologies are doing for you today and how they can work for you tomorrow in terms of the next step, which is where the highlighted features and requirements come in, which is where we can look at sort of the next step for your organization in terms of its growth and then the requirements that are required to move forward within your current journey into this newer area. So at this point, I'm going to hand things over to Craig, who will talk more specifically about the tool sets that are comprised of SASE as far as Broadcom's portfolio is concerned. Craig.
Sorry about that. My meeting controls went away and I couldn't get off mute. So I'm talking to myself. I apologize about that.
No problem. I was hoping you were still there. Okay, great.
Yeah, I am. I was on video. I just wasn't talking to anybody. So let me skip back here. I was trying to click around and I clicked past where I needed to be. So I apologize for that. Well, Edwin, thank you very much. Very great information around SASE and what does SASE mean and what is that strategy that Aurora can help provide our customers to implement SASE and really understand how it works in their enterprise. So quick introduction of myself. My name is Craig Faulkner. I'm a solution engineer and architect here at Broadcom, specifically in the Symantec enterprise division of Broadcom. I came over from the Symantec acquisition into the Broadcom family. I'm very happy to be here with you guys today to talk to you about what solutions do we offer and how we are the vendor that you can work with and put your trust in a trusted partner like Aurora to implement SASE. And I want to touch on what are those products that we offer that will help you achieve a SASE framework. So first and foremost, on the slide here, it's a quick depiction of what is the Symantec SASE framework. So Gartner actually has a myriad of recommendations, both required and optional components that they suggest that you need to have in order to implement a successful SASE strategy. What you're looking at here is actually what we have taken in our portfolio as the top 10 SASE components. Some of those are comprised of secure web gateway, DLP, CASB, continual monitoring, a cloud firewall service, and many more. And what that is to us is how can we give you a portfolio that is sufficient to cover the spectrum of SASE, but also be able to conduct things like Edwin talked about of reducing complexity, giving you a better total cost of ownership, giving you that zero trust approach that you can really depend on, and then being able to work with partners like Aurora to be able to continually understand what that strategy is, not only this year and next, but 5 and 10 years down the road. So let me go ahead and step into what is this framework really about and what does it look like? So on the right here, you can see that we have various applications. We have the internet, whether that be hosted on-prem applications, just going out straight to the internet for Google, or potentially on-prem and cloud hosted applications. And then on the left, you essentially have your users. How are they getting to these applications, whether that come through headquarters or a branch office, or if they're a remote employee out at a coffee shop or at home. So what this framework does is it gives you the ability to have a variety of access methods to the applications on the right-hand side of the slide. And it gives you the ability to come through a Symantec proxy-based architecture that not only fully terminates your traffic and also does SSL encryption or inspection, but it also gives you the ability to authenticate your users and apply a true zero trust approach, as we know that we have to authenticate and verify not only the users, but also the devices as they come into your network. And I went backwards. There we go. So as we build out this slide, you can see that as you go through the various functionalities, in the middle, we have our SASE framework, which shows the different technologies that we do, the various inspection inline of the traffic as it traverses from whatever the point of presence is on the left-hand side to the application, whether that be the internet or, like I said, a corporate or cloud application. So let me show you what this really looks like. Let me build out a model for you. So first thing I want to touch on here is managed devices. So you have a device that has an endpoint agent, you know where it resides, you know where it's coming from. So as it comes from the left side, it's going to traverse through the SASE framework, do any sort of content inspection or threat inspection as it traverses through the SASE framework. And then it's going to go out to try to access a certain application. So this first example is to just access the internet. So user comes from wherever their point of presence is. And that's, again, whether they're at home, on a roaming network, they're in the headquarters office, or they're in a branch office. They come through the SASE framework with the various sets of inspection criteria, whether that be through the web gateway or through DLP inspection. And then as they go out to the web, they're able to access the regular internet as you would have it set to be controlled. Here, we also give the ability to apply relevant security policies, do traffic inspection to make sure that we are giving the user not only a great experience as they're navigating the web, but we're also able to control the security of where they're going. The next piece on a managed device would be accessing some sort of data center or IaaS application. Here again, we have the ability to come through various points of presence, send the user through the SASE framework, all of which is very transparent to the user. And then they're able to go out to those applications that they have access to based on policy that you are able to provide and able to implement to give them the access they need for their particular job function. And then the last piece here is around SaaS applications. So as we know, Edwin talked about frequently that everything is going to the cloud. What is the perimeter? What is the edge? And so part of the SASE principle is that the edge is disappearing. And so how do we create an edge to where we can understand where the user is continually going? And the hardest part of that really is for cloud applications. So as they're traversing to SaaS applications, again, it's the same methodology. We understand what the device is because it's a managed device. Whatever the point of presence is that they are using and wherever they're closest to, we send them through the SASE framework and then apply stringent policy that is transparent to the user to make sure they are able to get policy that they need to be able to do their job function. And this slide is going crazy on me and skipping all around. I sincerely apologize here. Technical difficulties. Let me skip back. Okay, sorry about that. So last piece here is that the last piece is you need to be able to report on this. You need to be able to understand what it is that the users are doing in your network. And so we have integrations built in to where you can export your data, whether that be through our ICDX platform, which is our integrated cyber defense exchange. It's a communication bus that we've built with other third-party vendors to be able to communicate out to other third-party tools or to integrate with your SIM or your SOAR tools. But we have the ability to take all of the data across our SASE framework and be able to export that out to other third-party tools that we know you're using for your SOC and your incident response and other teams around audit and compliance and such things. So again, this is how we would implement a SASE framework for a managed device. So let's look at an unmanaged device, if I can get the slide to skip without going crazy. So again, unmanaged device looks very much the same. Again, very transparent to the user, SASE framework that gives you the ability to apply security controls that we offer in our portfolio holistically through a single vendor, but making sure that you're applying the security controls that you need across unmanaged devices as well. And what do I mean by unmanaged device? I mean a device where, say, a user is at a kid's soccer game on Saturday, or they're visiting their in-laws for the US holiday Thanksgiving next week. And they happen to have their personal computer, but they may need to do something while they're on the road or while they're visiting their in-laws. We can still give them the same access that they would need from a managed device by implementing the SASE framework. So what does that look like for the user? Again, they come through whatever the point of presence is. Typically in this situation, it's going to be some sort of roaming user. They would go through the same inspection that they would in the security stack, whether that be through, again, a web gateway, data loss prevention policy, through CASB for SaaS applications. And then they go out to the various points that they need to. Obviously, out to the internet is something that's relatively easy because they're on a personal device of some sort. So they would just go out to the internet. But if we looked at a corporate application, how do we get them access to a corporate application? Well, we have solutions that can be built around the SASE framework to give them access to a corporate application and still provide the security you need for that user to be able to access that corporate application based on the policies that you implement to give the user that access. But again, all applying zero trust framework to ensure that we don't implicitly trust the user or the device, but we continually authenticate both. We can also give them access to SaaS applications, things like Salesforce or Slack, things that Edwin mentioned earlier. We can give them access to those without them just going directly to them. As we know, over the past few years, we've seen an advent and an evolution to cloud applications, but a lot of that is centered around shadow IT. You don't understand fully where your users are going all the time. And so we need to make sure that we can implement a strategy to where we know where they're going. And so we can use our SASE framework to send them through things like the Cloud Access Security Broker to be able to understand what SaaS applications they're accessing, even on an unmanaged device. And then the last component here, again, exporting your data. You need to be able to understand what is the data that you are getting on your users so you can continually apply good policy that is secure, but also meets the needs of your business without impacting your users' productivity. I'll just touch again on our platform of ICDX to be able to create a communication bus between all your Symantec products out to third-party vendors, but also integrations directly with things like SIM and SOAR tools and other third-party SOC and IR related tools that you may have. Slides keep going backwards. I apologize. My last slide here. Awesome. Here we go. So this is it. This is where we are. We are in a digital age. We're in digital and cloud transformation. And so we at Symantec know that we can be your vendor. The one thing that Gartner really focuses on with the SASE framework is a single vendor that can offer you a true SASE framework across a myriad of solutions that we touched on as I was discussing earlier through things like Secure Web Gateway, Cloud Access Security Broker, DLP, Cloud Firewall, continual monitoring, zero trust, understanding of what your users are really doing as you continue to go to the cloud and have to understand what that edge looks like for your network. We can give you the solutions you need. We've just recently are in process as well of doing a Google Cloud Platform migration. This GCP migration gives us the scalability and low latency that you need to ensure that all the points of presence that your users are coming through can be applied in great, strict, but also usable policy sets across a myriad of solutions to implement your SASE framework. We are best of breed. We are best in class. And we can provide you the solutions you need to be able to build your SASE framework. And the big thing that I would like to really drive home here as I speak with Aurora today is Aurora is a premier partner of Broadcom and of Symantec that can help you with all of your implementation needs and all of your solutions. As Edwin mentioned earlier, they really want to take a consultative approach and be a partner that engages with you to understand what are you looking for in your SASE framework? What needs do you have? What gaps do you have to fill? And how can we as Symantec provide you the solutions that give you that, and Aurora be the partner to help you implement it? So just wrapping up here, I just want to thank Aurora for their time today, for inviting me to be a panelist here. Hopefully you're able to get a pretty quick look and high-level overview into the SASE framework that Symantec offers. We do have a myriad of solutions that go into our SASE framework, but we're here to support you and understand and get you to understand what those solutions look like. Please feel free to reach out to your Broadcom rep or your Aurora rep to ensure that you get the people you need in your corner to ensure that your SASE framework is developed not only timely, but you have the true understanding of how it's going to work in your enterprise. So I thank you for your time today, and I'm going to go ahead and pass the ball back over to Samantha.
Thank you, Craig. Before we ended, I just wanted to add that before we go to questions, I wanted to add that when you're evaluating whether or not cloud security solutions is right for you, a great place to start is with conducting security assessments. Aurora offers security consulting services that can help your organization understand what solutions might be right for you. So if you have any questions about scheduling a security assessment with Aurora, just contact us at sales@aurorait.com. And then we did have a couple of questions. For either Edwin or Craig, what does it mean that SASE is on the edge?
Do you want to grab that one, Craig?
You want me to?
Yeah, sure. Sure, if you'd like.
Yeah, no worries. So what it means, again, security or SASE, secure access services edge. What it means to be on the edge is that it is truly as close to your users and your devices as possible. So used to, we had a very defined edge. As Edwin mentioned, as he was speaking, we knew where the corporate data center began and ended. With SaaS applications, with IaaS, with people needing to access corporate applications, being roaming users, that edge really became fuzzy. And so we needed to redefine it. And so that was part of Gartner's strategy is how do we redefine the edge? And so the edge really means in this case, getting as close to that point of presence as possible to ensure that the speed of which the users are accessing applications and to prevent and to continue low latency to continue to have a solution that prevents user impact, so that way they're staying productive. So really just means getting as close to the users and devices as possible. That's what the edge is.
Okay, great. And then the other question that we have is, what is the difference between CASB and SASE?
Awesome. Yeah, I'll grab that one. Just because we've had quite a bit of, that'd be one of the few areas of these security controls that us, at Aurora here that we've implemented quite a bit in terms of sort of that one piece of the SASE sort of portfolio, if you will, equation that we've had experience with quite a bit. And so the primary difference I would say there is that it really consists of the SASE framework entirely, right? The cloud access broker essentially is a security tool that really sits between the user and the cloud applications and really has the capability of being able to monitor the activity and enforce sort of the security policies that you'd like to enforce across your corporate in your organization. So it really is bridging that gap. And like I said, it is one of the pieces, as you saw Craig mention, as part of sort of that portfolio or the architecture that's SASE sits inside of the Symantec offering there that really provides that benefit. So you see that there's a number of different technologies, and CloudSoc or CASB specifically here would be the one that would sit in there as well as one of those solutions. So that's how it would differentiate between the two.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Edwin and Craig, for talking today. And thank you for everyone for joining us for Aurora's webinar, Cloud Security Evolved. If you have any questions or just want to discuss further what we talked about today, you could contact us at sales@aurorait.com and we'll get you in touch with whomever can answer your questions. I'll be sending a recording of this webinar out to all of you later this evening or tomorrow. And thank you again, and have a great rest of your day.